Hello, dear viewers. I hope all is well. I hope you've had a wonderful holidays, a happy new year, and all this great stuff. I hope you were able to be with family. And let's just get straight to the point here. For those of you who haven't subscribed, I love Death Battle. And I love the creativity. I love the research. I love a lot of the effort that goes into this great show. Even though I don't always agree with the outcome, I still find something usually of value to take away from each individual experience. So I've been sitting on a few pretty decent ideas in the past, and I've been wanting for a long time to basically make a video pitching some of these ideas and suggestions for upcoming death battles. So I hope you enjoy what I have to offer. This is just going to be part one of a maybe two or maybe several part series, but I just wanted to have this out before the end of 2022, and I hope you enjoy. Big Daddy versus Brotherhood of Steel Paladin. This matchup scratches so many death battle and fanboy itches of mine that I can't help but smile. Both combatants are retro-inspired soldiers clad in power armor. The long-standing comparisons between both the Fallout and Bioshock series still maintained to this day. Both are seen as individual soldiers. Neither are particularly a certain character from their respective franchises. Both come with an established array of weapons, gear, and abilities, both with a never back down ethos and won't take shit from anyone. On top of all that, we'd be introducing two new franchises to Death Battle, Bioshock and Fallout, both of which I am a huge fan of. How has this not been made? For this battle, I like the idea of using the Fallout 4 power armor system where parts of the suit can be damaged, broken, and need to be repaired manually, and the operator needs to also manually enter or exit the suit. The armor also needs a power core in order to function, and without the core, the Paladin will either have to fight in a slow-moving, barely functioning suit, or exit the armor and fight that way. In terms of stats, the Big Daddy is stronger and faster, maybe, than the power armor, but neither are particularly agile. I think that the power armor is more durable than a Big Daddy suit, and while the Paladin can exit his suit, the Big Daddy armor was grafted onto the person's skin. Ouch. As for the fight, it would take place in Rapture for two reasons. You never see a Big Daddy traversing the wasteland, and Rapture was the home to some of the greatest minds on Earth, and the Brotherhood of Steel would love to get their hands on any of the salvageable tech that may lay in store. The fight itself would probably start over a Paladin finding a little sister. And after trying to take the child to a safe area, a Big Daddy arrives, drill revved up, lit up red, and tackles the Paladin into and through several walls. The Paladin would launch his assault with weapons like the assault rifle, laser rifle, frag grenade, and super sledge, but the Big Daddy, on the other hand, would get his drill and a few turrets or maybe drones. I have no idea whether the drill would actually pierce the power armor or how long it would take, but the Big Daddy would have a huge advantage in close range attacks. I could easily see that drill and the brute strength of the Big Daddy pulling the power armor apart piece by piece. But the Paladin would have the firepower to beat the Big Daddy because armor-piercing rounds would be able to shred the Big Daddy's armor. This fight would truly prove these two combatants' mettle, and I think it stands head and shoulders above several other Big Daddy matchups. Angie Woman versus Dark Magician Girl. You won't see a lot of anime on this list. It's not really my cup of tea when it comes to death battle scenarios, but sometimes there comes a franchise or two that I grew up with that fits the death battle bill. And this fight would be an exciting one. Digimon versus Yu-Gi-Oh! Anime has churned out plenty of waifu material over the decades. While some are helpful and compassionate to a fault, these two ladies can be easily summoned at a child's beck and whim. And that's the best intro I can get. Sue me. Both are sexualized embodiments of the magical girl stereotype and are tied to card games. Remember, Digimon did have a trading card game at one point. This would be a tough battle because throughout the Yu-Gi-Oh! Lore, we never got an idea of just how strong a monster is in the real world. Also, we do have a male counterpart for both Angie Woman and Dark Magician Girl, that being Angemon and the Dark Magician, which could totally be a fight in of itself. We've seen Digimon in the past, and while I still need to flesh out this matchup in a future video, probably try and make a scale or a base tier when it comes to how strong a Yu-Gi-Oh! Monster really is in the real world, it's still a unique enough matchup to keep it on this list. Starkiller versus the Stalker. Jedi Hunter versus the Reckoning of the Tano. While I did enjoy Raiden vs. Excalibur, this, in my opinion, is a way more intense fight for Warframe. And on the other side, bringing a Star Wars Legends fan favorite character can only amp this fight up that much more. Galactic assassins tasked with hunting down the greatest threats to their empire and bringing them to their own form of justice. Both being imbued with otherworldly powers, they both operate under secret orders and yet all but make their presence known at the first opportunity. Let's talk about the Stalker though. He doesn't have a whole lot of lore about him, but what we do know is that he was once a low-tier guard in the Orcan Empire. That was until he witnessed everything around him crumble and fall. This was due to the rise of the Tenno. Ever since then, he sought vengeance and killed an unknown number of Tenno across the Orcan system, eventually siding with the sentient Hun Hao to become the Shadow Stalker. As for Starkiller, born on Kashyyyk, and after the brutal murder of his father, young Galen Marek was adopted by Darth Vader and was raised as his secret apprentice. When he came of age, he was tasked with hunting down the remaining Jedi still alive throughout the galaxy, before being betrayed twice, forming the Rebel Alliance, fighting and besting his former master, fighting Darth Sidious, and dying while saving the rebellion. However, this fight would utilize the Starkiller's clone as seen in Force Unleashed 2, as technically the clone is able to do pretty much the same feats as the original, but has a few more powers to boot and an extra lightsaber. Thematically, this fight is one between someone who found redemption and inner peace, and someone who held on to his hate in order to commit further atrocities. The Stalker is the very embodiment of the dark side that Starkiller managed to escape, and that kind of banter would be perfect for this fight. Perhaps Galen's clone would be on a mission with the Rebel Alliance when a vision of the Stalker comes to him. Somehow the Emperor put a mark of death on the former Darksider, and the Stalker has come to collect. In terms of scaling, both Galen and his clone scale to Darth Vader, as both have bested him in combat, so they would need to be at least high enough in proficiency in regards to force combat abilities and lightsaber combat techniques. The Stalker, however, is an interesting case, as his lethality comes from being able to negate the abilities of other Warframes. So while they usually are able to perform countless powers, skills, and abilities, the Stalker basically takes those powers away and makes the casual Warframe easy picking. The Stalker also has a wider variety of weapons and arsenal, and a more diverse array of powers. He also has way more experience than Starkiller, but what the apprentice has is raw power. This would be a wild fight and should happen at some point soon. Well, what do you know? Another Star Wars Expanded Universe fight. Garros versus Darth Sion. How do you beat somebody who refuses to die? Someone who, regardless of being beaten, bloodied, impaled, ripped apart, dismembered, or otherwise broken, can always scrape themselves off the floor and continue to fight. Someone who grows more powerful after each death. Garrus, Mortal Kombat's Assassin of Time versus Darth Sion, the Sith Lord of Pain of the Old Republic. While little is really known of either combatant, at least when compared to other characters in their respective franchise, the impact they left is undeniable. As stated, it's their immortality that is quite possibly their biggest claim to fame. Darth Sion is a Sith Lord who lived thousands of years before the events of the movies, and whose connections with the Force has allowed him to achieve a level of immortality, but at the price of an all-consuming agony and of pain. It is this grasp on suffering that has allowed him to live as long as he has. Garrus, on the other hand, is an artificial construct, crafted by the Keeper of Time itself, Kronika. He is a fixed point in time, and as such cannot be killed by any known means. He is actually composed of sand, and is capable of rebuilding himself as such. You see kind of why this is an enjoyable matchup? Two immortal forces tearing at each other. Normally the idea of maybe putting a Star Wars character versus a Mortal Kombat character might seem a bit one-sided, but here I think is a case to be made for either to win. Darth Sion does have access to the dark side force techniques such as telekinesis, force whirlwind, force wound, slow, rage, force immunity, force drain, and along with his lightsaber, he aided in almost a near genocide of all Jedi during the Old Republic. Garrus, on the other hand, can manipulate time and form durable constructs like hammers, swords, walls, and other objects for obliterating foes. Think of the Sandman from Spider-Man. He can also become intangible so that physical attacks can phase through him. The only weakness I can see in each combatant is that Darth Sion isn't as experienced as Garrus, as the latter literally has millions if not billions of years worth of combat experience. And Darth Sion isn't as powerful as other renowned Sith Lords in terms of offensive force capabilities, as his tactics mostly involve tiring out an opponent as opposed to something like Force Lightning. Garrus has control over time, but I don't remember if he actually implements it during an actual fight. Also, Garrus's sand weapon constructs can be effective at cleaving through people, but let's be honest, so is a lightsaber. I'm certain that said lightsaber can cut through any sand construct, and while not a master of the dark side, Sion's use of the Force would be a challenge for Garrus. While neither of these two are the poster boy for their respective universe, this proves that even a secondary antagonist can have a little bit of time in the spotlight. Ed versus Caboose. While Ed versus Caboose started out as a joke battle, and rightfully so, over time the possibility of this becoming a legitimate death battle became more and more apparent. If done right, this has the potential to be one of the most wholesome matchups of all time, because Caboose and Ed are the pinnacle of what it means to be a good friend. Even when manipulated by those closest to them, they'll offer you the clothes off their back because that's just the type of person they are. If anything, Caboose and Ed would likely become best friends. There's this comic series that actually pitted Jason Voorhees against Leatherface, but for the majority of the story, they were just friends and found a common connection. Granted, Caboose can be seen more as a threat to himself and those around him, case in point, his team-killing tendencies and his overall acceptance of these murderous urges is possibly a side effect of having your mind possessed by an aggressive AI, but I digress. But these behaviors seem more accidental than intentional or just a misunderstanding of the world around him. Not the best mentality for a sci-fi future soldier, which Ed would definitely be into. Ed, on the other hand, is a brick wall, and will generally accept whatever mind-breaking amount of pain he is dealt. He recognizes dangerous situations, sometimes, but usually is too lost in his own imagination to pay much attention to the situation at hand. This creative and imaginative part of him tends to get himself and others into trouble. Never thought I'd be analyzing the mental traits of Caboose or Ed for a fight to the death scenario, but here we are. So this wouldn't be a one-sided fight, as both characters have similar stats and fourth wall breaking potential. Caboose playing through the Halo Reaches campaign and Ed running fast enough to turn back time like it were pages of a book. Both can survive falling from space, re-entry, and impact. And just think of the montage of Ed and Caboose having a good time. Ed introducing Caboose to chickens, Caboose allowing Ed to pilot Sheila, about to shoot Eddie or church or something, stealing the Red Team's flag, them both enjoying buttered toast, Ed reading spooky stories from his comic book, Eddie arguing with Church over a scam, hiding from Sarah, both eating jawbreakers while watching a sunset. Oh, and sound effects are a must. But I saw in a recent video by Nemesis Bloodrife that people would want to see Ed fight Patrick. And to that I would say no 1,000 times no. Personally, I am not a huge SpongeBob fan, never really was. And throughout this video, if you haven't been able to tell, this is my experiences. These are my sort of things that I grew up with or that I'm familiar with, and SpongeBob, it ain't one of them. I do not enjoy that show, and I would not want to see a return character, especially to have someone as lovable as Ed go against someone who I particularly just find annoying as Patrick, and from my understanding, his character has just gone way downhill over the years. So, Ed versus Caboose. Or, how could you pass up the opportunity? Ed versus Blue. Mandalore the Ultimate versus Tiber Septim. Two legendary leaders who lived in the panels of early franchise history. Both would lay the foundation and/or establish a long-lasting empire that would shape their worlds for the rest of history. Both led massive armies to conquer entire civilizations, races, and ideologies. Both were highly skilled and trained warriors who weren't afraid to lead from the front line. This will be the third and final Star Wars matchup, but it would also be the first entry from the Elder Scrolls franchise. Fantasy versus sci-fi. In the same vein of what made Sauron versus Lich King such a great matchup in my opinion, we'd have these two leaders dueling it out rather than throwing millions of lives into the grinder of war. Tiber would challenge Mandalore to combat. Both warriors would have their own weapons and armor, and their own personal mount. Mandalore the Ultimate would be riding the Basilisk war droid, while Talos would call upon the Red Dragon. This fight might not have as much hype or build-up, and the characters are only really known to those diehard fans of either franchise who bother to look into the franchise's history. So it's definitely a niche idea, and definitely wouldn't capture the overall epicness that Sauron versus the Lich King achieved. I can guarantee you the next fight will truly be epic. I was happy to see that Death Battle finally expanded their horizons to include mythological characters and creatures. And while Hercules versus Sun Wukong was an interesting idea that looked unique and was presented in a different format than we've seen in the past, it was too bad that the result was absolutely ruined by a complete and utter curb stomp that left me feeling let down. If Death Battle were to do a fight between two characters of legend and myth, not only should these combatants be on par with one another in terms of grandiosity, but so too should be the fight. A clash that lives up to its epic origins. Two warriors of myth and legend, of great stature, of skill and fame, clashing, not in a one-sided battle, but something that can transcend time itself and would echo throughout the panels of history and myth as we know it. What we need is a matchup where both combatants don't rely on over-the-top storytelling and multi-layers of immortality. What we need are two warriors of legend to face off in a bout that would give the various pantheons of gods and goddesses pause and capture their attention. What we need is a truly epic fight. Beowulf versus Achilles. I have held on to this fight for well over 10 years now, back before Season 3 of Deadliest Warrior was officially announced. While I have no tangible proof to say otherwise, I do believe I was the first person out there, maybe on the internet, to propose this as a fight. Bold, I know to say, but I believe with all my heart that I was among one of the first, if not the first, to think of this as a potential fight. And I do treat this matchup with the most passion of any versus battle I have ever pondered. Beowulf versus Achilles is also a chance for me to research into the real-world weapons, armor, and lore that inspired and shaped these two legendary warriors. Beowulf was this Anglo-Saxon warrior from Germanic heritage, where present-day Sweden would be located, whilst Achilles was born in Phalanx, somewhere in ancient Greece, so there are about 1,000 years at least separating these two in time period. The Beowulf tale dates as far back as anywhere between 700 and 1000 AD, whilst the Iliad was written by Homer around circa 8th century BC. Both stories revolve around two warriors and their armies being summoned to help resolve an issue of a neighboring province. These minor issues being the demonic hellspawn known as Grendel and the Siege of Troy. Despite both these figures being fictional, that we know of, they both have real-world ties to historical cultures, eras, and I'm not sure if you're aware, dear viewer, but I love Deadliest Warrior. I still do. It served as my entryway for my love of history, and I'm sure that it helped lay a foundation for future versus battle shows like Death Battle. By factoring in these types of weapons and armors that were accurate to the time, this helps fill in any gaps that the legends may not have elaborated on. The fight itself would also take inspiration from practices of ancient mythology and history, as well as epic poetry, that being champion warfare, something we actually see in the Iliad. This is where each army would send forth their best fighter and have this battle settled by single combat, a one-on-one duel. Like maybe after months of grueling bloodshed, these Greeks and Anglo-Saxon forces decide to pit their best against their very best and see who the gods favor in this fight. Both would come equipped with their arsenals that would be accurate with their time, so these would be spears, swords, shields, armor, just different materials from either side. Beowulf would have usually had iron-based weapons, maybe steel, while Achilles may have had some iron, but definitely would have had bronze. From spear to sword, most likely start off with either combatant keeping each other at a distance with their spears, but it would soon move into a sword-on-sword fight. This is where the fight would get brutal. The courageous Achilles staring down the prideful Beowulf, both recognizing the other as an equal. Unlike anyone or anything they have ever faced, this would be a long and hard-fought battle, pushing both of their superhuman stamina and strength to the limit. The thought of backing down never occurring to them. This is an Ultimate Warrior showdown, but only one can emerge victorious. How do we top something as epic and truly legendary as a fight as Beowulf versus Achilles? Simple. By giving the world the most metal fight of all time. Doomsday versus the Doomslayer. Come on, two nigh unkillable juggernauts with Doom in the name. At some point, somebody got the bright idea to make something so powerful, so filled with primordial rage and anger, and allowed it to become so strong that not even gods could stop them. Beings that have no reason to stop, whose sole purpose was to rip, tear, eviscerate, obliterate, annihilate everything in its path. And then one would think, what could possibly go wrong? In one word, Doom. Doomsday, the monster that beats Superman, versus the Doomslayer, the bane of hell itself. If you thought Garrus versus Darth Sion was a battle of immortals, which it is and still is, but damn, this would be way more intense. Neither of these two backing down. Doomsday, who was all but genetically hardwired to destroy all life. Doomslayer, who has this demonic bloodlust that can only be satiated by tearing the forces of hell limb by limb. This is probably the most metal death battle. These are two nigh unkillable forces, both encompassing the very core ideal of what the other seeks to destroy. Thematically, this makes a lot of sense, and definitely would be the best matchup for the Doomslayer rather than a rematch for the Master Chief.
So there you have it, dear viewers. 8 unique death battle ideas that I really haven't seen anywhere else. I hope you enjoy them. I have plenty more ideas in store. I'm going to make a follow-up video because this definitely didn't encompass everything that I wanted to put out for you guys, but I also want to work on other projects at the moment. I've been wanting to work on a Fallout video game pitch idea for a while now, and I really want to get back on track with that. I have several other things that I really want to work towards, and I hope you guys will stay tuned for that content. And until then, please let me know what you think of this video, any other videos I might have done. I still have to do a few reactions to other death battle videos and content. But tell me what you think. Comment below, and please let me know. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Take care of yourselves, and goodbye.